Good evening and welcome to the regular briefing meeting of the Kernersville Board of Aldermen. Today is Wednesday, January 5th at 6:30. We'll begin this meeting with a call to order and an invocation by Reverend Carol Fulton with Children of Zion Outreach Ministry, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Your hand was with us, Lord. And Father, now we come to you in 2022. Father, we're asking you right now in the name of Jesus for your guidance and your leadership and your wisdom. Father, we pray for our aldermen. We pray for our mayor. We pray for those that are in leadership here in Kernersville, that Father, that your will be done and not ours. God, just come into this meeting. Help us as we make decisions for the community of Kernersville. In Jesus' name we pray. And the people of God said, Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Fulton. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. It's my honor to welcome all of you here this evening, and to especially welcome and introduce our North Carolina State Representative, Donnie Lambeth. He represents District 75, which includes Kernersville, serving in many capacities, including as the Senior Chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, Vice Chairman of the Appropriations Health and Human Services Committee, Chairman of the Health Committee, and serves on many other committees, including Education K-12 and Education Universities. We appreciate your service so long in Forsyth County on the school board and in your business capacity, and welcome you here tonight. Representative Lambeth.
Thank you all so much for allowing me a few minutes to give you a brief update. And I'm not sure there's much you can say about Raleigh that's brief. You know, we went down there last year in January, and we didn't finish up till the 1st of December. My wife kept asking me, when are y'all going to finish? When are you going to finish? And I really didn't know, because that's kind of the way the schedule works down there sometimes, is you don't always know. We're actually going to be called back into session sometime in the next couple weeks, because we still have a number of things that have not been finished. So we've got some unfinished business that we still will do. Typically, in a 2-year election cycle, we're elected for the 2 years, and the first year after the election is what they call a long session, and that's what we just finished, the long session in 21. And then we have a short session the second year of that biennium. Our short session technically should start sometime in May, and generally the purpose of the short session is simply to update the budget, tweak it a little bit, anything that's changed, and not spend a lot of time in Raleigh. I can tell you I've been down there now 9 years. I've been very fortunate to represent Forsyth County and represent this district, but it's always difficult to know exactly how long we'll be there and how long the long session will be or how long the short session will be. So I'm fortunate that I am retired and I'm able to adjust to the schedule as they lay the schedule out for us. I thought what I'd do this afternoon is share a little bit with you about this long session that we've just completed and some of the highlights, particularly from the session. I would tell you that my district, I've been very fortunate to represent parts or all of Kernersville over my 9-year tenure. The district has changed 3 times. I've been elected in this District 75 5 times, but it's changed 3 times. And it's quite possible it will change again. The courts are looking at the maps that we drew here a few weeks ago, and they may ask us to make some additional adjustments. So I do feel pretty confident that I will continue to represent Kernersville in this area, but I've had Clemens to Walkertown, and it's sort of shifted in between. The one common denominator has been most or parts of Kernersville during that tenure. And obviously I know a whole lot about what you guys are up to. I appreciate the relationship I've had with your manager, your mayor, and other members of the staff. We've tried to listen to some of your concerns, some of your issues. I would tell you that it's very difficult in Raleigh to get things done. And it does take time. It does take seniority. And I would tell you that you are very fortunate here in Kernersville to have a senator that's been now in Raleigh for a number of years and a House member that's completing my 5th term. It takes you a few terms to build the seniority up to be able to get the titles that was articulated when the mayor started. I would tell you that my background in education, by being on the school board, enabled me to involve myself in a number of education areas. But my background in healthcare, obviously, both Senator Krawick and I chair health in Raleigh. It's very, very unusual for one county and in an area like this to have the chairs of both the House Health and the Senate Health. And today we were both just named to chair a new task force on access to health care and Medicaid expansion in North Carolina to look at that issue. She'll chair it for the Senate and I'll chair it for the House. And it's, again, very unique to have two individuals from the same area in such influential positions. The good news is that we've been able to get some really good things done for not only Kernersville, but for Forsyth County and Winston-Salem and the other municipalities in the county. I've shared with you it's way too long, but it's long because there was a lot of things that went on this year. I think about, in some respects, we had the perfect storm. Now, I speak of it in a positive way. You know, we think about the perfect storm being a negative, but we went back to Raleigh amid lots of issues around COVID, unemployment, uncertainty. I mean, mental health in North Carolina is a real struggle right now with people that need help. We got into the long session and we were asked on multiple occasions to allocate federal money. The total amount of federal money that we allocated, $8.1 billion. And that doesn't include the direct appropriations that the feds made to the big airports, to the cities, and school districts, and for unemployment. That was handled directly from the feds down to those areas. But we allocated 8.1, and that's one reason we were able to help you in a number of areas that had been struggling with some of your nonprofit organizations that needed help with all the issues they're dealing with around COVID. And then lo and behold, we get into May. The economist in Raleigh said, you've got a $6 billion surplus. Even among all the challenges with COVID and unemployment, North Carolina did extremely well during the previous year. Now you take those two things and then you add to that, North Carolina also had not had a budget since 2017. We hadn't had a budget. Now, when we don't have a budget, it's unlike the federal folks where everything shuts down. What happens in North Carolina is we have a provision that says you roll the most recent approved budget forward, and that is your budget going into the next biennium. In North Carolina, we had not had an updated budget since 2017. Well, that meant that we weren't spending a number of things that we had anticipated spending, and that money just stayed in the fund and built up a fairly significant fund balance. So we had federal money coming in, we had a very good economic forecast and then we had the fund balance carried over from the previous 2 years. Now you might ask, so why didn't we have a budget? The General Assembly couldn't come to an agreement with the governor. And in North Carolina, our governor has veto power, and he vetoed the budget in those two separate sessions. And we could never work out an arrangement with him. You might also ask, this year, you did get a budget, but you didn't get a budget till November. Well, the fiscal year starts July 1 for the state, and many of you, the cities across states, school systems, all are on a July year. a lot of things that you have to plan are contingent on what the state does. And here we are down there thinking that we might try to get a budget done in June, but lo and behold, it was November. Now, why did it take so long? Well, in part, it took long because we were negotiating with the governor week after week after week, because we felt like after having 2 sessions, 4 years with no budget, we needed a budget. We needed to get the COVID federal money out. We needed to get the surplus money out. And we had a lot of catch-up things. Now, you can imagine if you hadn't had a budget to do some routine maintenance, capital acquisitions for several years, those things continue to deteriorate. And that's what happened in North Carolina. That might be why you've seen some of the deterioration in some of the facilities across the state. The money was not allocated. So we felt like, General Assembly and the governor felt like we had to reach an agreement on the budget this year because there was just way too much at stake. And so it took, our typical process would require a budget by July 1. Sometimes it might go a few weeks into the July period. But typically we have a state budget fairly soon after the start of the year. But we were negotiating with the governor, and fortunately we were able to get an agreement on a spending plan, a tax plan, and that's what's in this document. What I would tell you is that there are many aspects that in this budget that I love. There are some things in this budget that I don't like. I would guess that when you guys approve a budget, there's probably some things in there that you don't really like. There's a lot of things you do like. That's why you support and move forward with a financial plan. There are things in here I would like to see done differently. I think most people know I'm a pro healthcare and I'm a pro education guy. And I think we should be doing more in education. But I would also tell you that the way the budget's done in Raleigh at state level is not like you do your budget, whether it's your business or the city here budget. It's a very different process. And it took me a little while. My background is in finance. I like to brag to people, to tell people that out of 170 members, I'm the only one in a master's in business administration in the General Assembly. And my background was doing budgets for years at Wake Forest Baptist. So I went in thinking that this is the way you do the budget. And I had to learn a whole different way of doing the budget because they don't do it the way you or I would think about putting together a budget. And it took a little time to adjust. But fortunately, I was able to adjust. And after a couple terms, having worked on the budget and health, and then as an appropriation, I was made a senior appropriator. Now, what that means is I'm really leading the budget for the House. I'm making a lot of decisions. But what that really means for this district, quite frankly, is it puts me in a really good position to represent you when you need some things that some members may not be able to get. Because I'm putting in, quite frankly, a lot of long hours. I'm looking at the funding sources, and there are multiple funding sources in Raleigh that you have to deal with. And I'm in a really good position to help where it makes sense to help direct funding back into Forsyth County and back into my district. Some people may not like it because they might think of that as pork, but it is, quite frankly, the way it works. And I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to be leading the House budget process. That puts me in a position of negotiating with the governor, trying to figure out how to get closer to what the governor would like, what the leadership would like, and putting together all the pieces of the puzzle. And that's what we fortunately were able to do this year. I would tell you that many things that North Carolina's doing are spot on. You've seen the announcements with some really strong economic news, whether it was Apple, whether it's Toyota, lots of economic news. 10 years ago, North Carolina, in the Forbes ranking of states for business, ranked North Carolina 41st in the nation. 41st. Well, if you were a big plant or you were a big business looking to relocate, you probably weren't going to look at North Carolina. We had a very high tax rate for corporations. We weren't the best climate for a startup company or a new company relocating. Forbes ranked North Carolina this year, and actually the last couple of years, #1 as the most favorable state for doing business. So it's not by accident that Toyota and these other companies have looked at North Carolina. We have a very dedicated workforce. We have a good cost of living. We bring good value to corporations. And this budget actually phases out the corporate tax rate. It's another tool to help us attract more industry to North Carolina. And as I was saying a little earlier, you guys geographically are in a wonderful position here in this region with the new manufacturing sites, the new companies relocating around the airport, Greensboro, High Point, in this area for people that need housing, a good place to live. So you guys are in a really good position to take advantage of some of that. Let's shift a little bit to this packet of information. Let me orient you a little bit. This basically is a summary of everything we did during the year in different areas. The state breaks down their functions very much like you might, things like public safety, healthcare, education. And this is a summary of areas that we dealt with during the year. I've laid it out so that you can see if it's a bold item, it was something that the General Assembly did, but the governor vetoed it, so it did not make it into law. If it's in italics, it was signed into law and became law. And if it's normal print, then it's a bill that was probably introduced, but did not make its way through a committee structure or make it through one of the other chambers. I tell people, because I get lots of ideas of bills or laws they want me to introduce, and I've introduced a number of really good bills, but those bills oftentimes don't make it through the process. Actually, very small percentage of bills that's introduced actually make its way all the way into law. It's a challenge. Sometimes it takes years. I've had bills this year that I introduced when I was a freshman legislator. It's finally worked their way through. So you keep working at it, you keep fine-tuning it, you keep listening to the other legislators' concerns, and you eventually can find what that right magic is to get something passed into law. So what you've got here is by area, by functional area, everything that the General Assembly basically dealt with between the budget and policy. And I'm not going to go through all this way too much, but there's a couple things in here I would point out on page 7, because page 7 is where I get most of the questions. They want to know, when people email me, call me, or just run into me somewhere, they want to know, so what are you doing to reduce my taxes? What are you doing to save me some money? The General Assembly has actually been doing tax reform over the last several years, and this budget is no exception. We were able to do a number of things in this budget, reducing the individual tax rate over a period of years to 3.99% from the current 5.25%, and that's built into the budget. We've also increased the standard deductions, so more individuals on the low income level, because the standard deduction and the child tax credit is increased, will actually experience no taxes that fall in those low income levels. One of the things that North Carolina is noteworthy for is the military, with Fort Bragg and the things we do for the military. It was a very tough negotiating point with the governor, but we were able to eliminate the state income tax on military pensions this year, because we want to be known as a military-friendly state. And we've actually been told by retired military that are in Bragg, we're moving to Tennessee or we're moving to another state because you tax our pension. And so this was something that our team worked really, really hard on, and it is in law now that military pensions are exempt. And we do expect that to have a ripple effect of individuals who now will retire and stay in North Carolina. They're very talented individuals and hopefully they'll find their way into maybe volunteering in classroom or other areas in North Carolina. The other area that I probably get most of my questions about are emails, pay raises. Everybody's kind of interested in, so what are you doing for me? And remember now, we haven't had a budget since 2017, which meant that a lot of state employees, teachers particularly, got no increase over that period of time. We made some minor adjustments in individual bills during those years, but generally, a lot of employees who are state employees, including teachers, education workers, did not get an increase. So we're trying to catch back up. This budget did include a 5% for all state workers and teachers. It did raise the minimum wage for non-certified to $15. That's an issue we've heard a lot about, $15 an hour. And then we were able to use a significant amount of the COVID money to help with bonuses for healthcare workers and for teachers for the challenges they've had in the past year and this year in the classroom. And I would tell you that those have been well received. Would I like to see more, particularly in teacher salary? Yeah, sure. But it is a negotiating process. North Carolina ranks second in the Southeast for average teacher pay. And I think there's many legislators who would like to see us do a little bit better than that. Georgia's a state that uses a lot of their lottery money for teacher salary. We do not use lottery money to fund teacher salaries. We use it for things like scholarships and facility, building maintenance, building new buildings and things like that. The only other thing I would highlight that, and this was a negotiating point with the governor. The governor wanted more supplemental money for what's considered low wealth counties. Well, I was able to get Winston-Salem County considered as a low wealth county. And there were only 5 counties that we excluded, but every other county will share in this $100 million teacher supplement fund that will be used to help supplement salaries in the districts that are viewed as low performing or low wealth counties. And some people ask me, so is Winston-Salem County really a low wealth county? Well, in the traditional sense, it's not, but we got all counties included except 5, and those are really the big 5 counties and cities. Let me shift now as I'm finalize to a little bit about here in this area. And I did try to contact your county manager and mayor on occasion to find out if there's some things you needed, whether it's water, sewer, because we had a lot of water, sewer money. We still have one project that we think there's a little confusion around, that we think it's actually Kernersville water sewer money that Senator Crawford and I are working on to try to get that clarified. It's coming to Forsyth County, but we believe there's about $3.1 million that's for Kernersville that we're trying to clarify. I would tell you, even though we're working long hours and long weeks, it moves very fast when things begin to move. You're either doing non-budget related things, all of a sudden the budget moves very fast. And there, in those last few months, things were moving very, very fast, and we were trying to figure out how to allocate the money. I was calling staff here, trying to figure out, could you use a little bit more money in this area? Could you, and we were trying to move that money around. So in Kernersville, we have a local government infrastructure grant, $400,000. I was able to get some money for Paul Senior, which I've done in prior years as well, that didn't get funded because there was no budget. And obviously that was a COVID related. We were down at the fire department passing out a check here a couple weeks ago, and we got $200,000 for the fire department for equipment. There's $250,000 for general economic development. And I think it was probably, Curtis, the last couple of weeks where I was saying, I still got a little bit of money. Can you use a little bit more money? And we came up with this $1 million for the potential land for investment in a park here in Kernersville. And hopefully you'll be able to finish that up and use that money well. There are within the budget, and it's about a 1,500-page document. Sometimes it's hard to even find the line item, but within the budget, there is money allocated to the YMCAs. So your Y here will receive funds. I would estimate about $100,000 for the Y. And then there are other sort of grant monies available for the fire departments. We were able to get $3 million for I'll call it more of a regional at Blues Creek. This was something I worked with the Forsyth County Commissioners on. They're wanting to develop a park up at Blues Creek that would actually be for multi-counties. We'd introduced that bill, but we also were able to get the funding for that. And as I mentioned, the $3.1 million, we're still trying to sort through to make sure it is a Kernersville allocation. In total, the delegation was able to get about $300 million for Forsyth County. And you've seen some of the stories on some of the other areas. Airport received money. There's certainly a need there. We've got money to potentially build a drone manufacturing site there at the airport, Smith Reynolds. We were able to get extra money for the school system and extra money for the Forsyth Tech, Winston-Salem State. So it was as I would say, it was a good year. And it was well worth the time we put into it to be able to get a budget that the governor signed. In fact, it was almost before I left Raleigh that day that he signed that budget, and that is unheard of. Typically the governor in North Carolina sits, whether any governor, it's a few days, it might even be right at the 10-day limit, sign it. But he literally signed that budget before most legislators had gotten out of Raleigh that day, because he felt strongly himself that we needed to get a budget. We're long overdue, need to get this money out, and let's move on. And we'll work to fight another day and fund things another day. I don't know if y'all start getting any letters yet on your funding, but you should start. It typically takes about 60 days for the state to, quote, certify the budget. And then once they certify it, then they will send letters out. And you've gone through some of this before on what's expected of you in terms of information and compliance and those things. Take a minute or two just looking ahead. We think that when we go back for the short session, it will be a very short session because we've had a very long session. This year is an election year. Most members would like to be out getting ready for the election season, raising money. And we were there so long, we don't think that we'll be there very long in May. Between now and May, though, we will have to deal with the court review of the district lines. It's possible that a few lines might get changed. It's possible that it could be broader than that. It's possible that whatever the current court decision is, it will get appealed to the next level. So, you've seen where the filing period was put off, and you've seen where the election was put off till May. It wouldn't surprise me, quite frankly, if it be put off a little longer, because these things do usually take some time. But that's a big issue that we're trying to work through at the General Assembly as those court cases are resolved and given some directions given to us. As I thought about things to maybe suggest as we go forward, might think about me being here with you in, April and do a little planning for the short session. We've already identified one area that we probably need a little money to try to help them. And I'm going to try to figure out how to use maybe some COVID money to help that facility. I think if we maybe meet, we could probably do it at a briefing, and think about some of the needs that you guys have, what your vision is for this area. And I view my job as representing you and supporting you and trying to help fund, and whether it's a policy issue, we had an issue a term ago or so on beautification trees, and so you never know what the issue might be. But we've had a great relationship. But I think as I go into a short session that probably will start sometime in May, I'll come back out. We talk a little bit about what you might have on your agenda for a short session or even beyond that. Because once we get through the short session, we will actually start, committees are working every month, and we will start thinking about the next budget. The House will lead the budget next time, and they rotate it. Senate led the budget process this last time. The House will lead it this time, which puts me really in a really good position to be able to, again, continue to support you in areas where you need a little help up here. And with that, I will pause and stop and just tell you again how much I appreciate the support I get from this area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the information and your explanation of some of the kind of the behind the scenes or the things that are not really reported as well as the final outcomes. But some of the efforts you've helped fund in Kernersville will benefit the citizens for many, many years to come. So it's a lot of impact in a single year, but it's an impact of hopes and dreams from past years and to serve a community, the entire community, well into the future. So we really appreciate you helping us with investments in parks and public safety and all of the other keeping good state employees and all the other things that you were involved in. Does the board have any questions or comments at this time? Go ahead, General.
Representative Lambert, as a retired Brigadier General in the North Carolina National Guard, and on behalf of a couple of retired Sergeant Majors up in here tonight, and the many, many veterans, retired veterans here in North Carolina, I just want to say to you, sir, and to all the legislators there up in Raleigh, thank you for all that you do for our military and for our veterans. And eliminating that state tax on our retirement, that is huge. I've talked to a lot of my fellow retirees across the state, and we're all grateful. And I just want to express that to you, sir. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, sir.
Any other comments or questions? Well, we'll plan to meet with you again in April, and
Good.
We're really excited about that opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Before we move on, I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't also express the comment Representative Lambeth made about himself and Senator Krovic being available to help solve problems for people who live in Kernersville during the pandemic. I got a number of calls that the solution was at the state level, and both offices were extremely helpful at looking out for the concerns of Kernersville residents, and we do appreciate that as well. All right, we will move on to speakers from the floor. If you'd like to address the board on an item that is not on the agenda, this is an opportunity to speak. Seeing no one here for speakers from the floor, we'll move on to agenda item 1B, consideration of the purchase of 8.16 acres of property on Beeson Road. Mr. Swisher.
Madam Mayor and Board, I covered this briefly in closed session the other night. There's a parcel of land on Beeson Road. You can see it up on the screen there. It is a remnant parcel that DOT had remaining when they built the new Interstate 40. They also have a remnant parcel on the other side, basically on the south side there. But this parcel it touches some of the land that the town owns down at Ivy Redmond Park. Catherine, if you'll kind of show them where the town's land is there that it touches. There's the town's land, and up above that. So we have some land there that it touches. There is also a possibility property owner next to this piece of property has expressed some interest in maybe trading some of his property for the back part of some of this property if the board moves forward in buying it. DOT contacted us, asked if we were interested. It is 8.16 acres. Basically, for DOT, it's a remnant parcel because they have no real good access to it. Some of it is in a floodplain. So it's not, it's not the best land, but there's probably some of it that would be usable for Parks and Rec. So the price of it is $5,700 for that 8.16 acres of property. DOT has appraised it, of course. We're recommending, staff has looked at it, we're recommending purchasing that property. As I said, it would be, it would touch some of our property on both sides, to the east and to the north as well. So, don't know that we would go down and start doing anything on it right now, but we would certainly at some point in the future may have some use for a portion of that property. And, roughly for $800 an acre, you probably can't buy any property that cheap. So be glad to answer any questions the board may have. If you'd like to move forward with the purchase, we would need a motion authorizing myself to do so, and we would bring that, I would move forward with DOT to make that happen.
Is there questions or discussion, or do I have a motion?
I'd make a motion that we authorize the town manager to proceed on behalf of the town to purchase that property.
Okay, I have a motion by Alderman Apple. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Alderman Thompson. All those in favor? It's unanimous. All right, item 1C is consideration of a contract with Ed Powell for services as a town attorney.
Madam Mayor and Board, at the last meeting, Board made the motion for John Wolf to continue as town attorney until December 31st of 2021, and for Ed Powell to become the town attorney. He is now the assistant town attorney, become the town attorney effective January 1st, 2022. You have in there, in your packet, the contract. It's basically stays the same as one he has now. His salary would be $115,000 per year. Also include his professional development, which is standard, and his malpractice insurance as well. Everything else, and I think that was probably both of those were in his last contract as well. So be glad to answer any questions you may have. I think all of you are pretty familiar with Ed. He's here 3 days a week, somewhere between 8 hours and 12 hours a day, just depending on the day. He attends both board meetings. Even the days that he's not back here in the office, his office right behind the courtroom here. He's been here several of those days when he's not in office. He's usually here Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but he's been here several times on Monday or Friday, and also always available by phone or email or however we need to get in touch with him. So he's certainly available at any time we need him. He's just here in the office those 3 days, most weeks. Some weeks is more, very few weeks when he's not here those 3 days. So, be glad to answer any questions. Ed can certainly answer any as well that you may have.
All right, do I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion by Alderman Thompson. Do I have a second?
That's second.
Second by Alderman Barrow. All those in favor? Raise your right hand. Thank you. It's unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Powell.
Thank
We
you
are
very much.
looking forward to continuing to work with you.
Look forward to working with you in the same fashion we've been doing, and it's a great new board that we have, and I'm excited about the future.
Thank you. You've been doing a great job for us, so the future's bright.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, so 1D is consideration of an ordinance to amend Chapter 10, Article 3 of the Code of Ordinances to update the noise ordinance for the town of Kernersville. I do have 2 speakers signed up to speak, but we'll start with a presentation by staff.
Madam Mayor and Board, we discussed this somewhat. I think the speakers were present last month. They spoke on some issues regarding the noise ordinance. I will tell you that the noise ordinance is not really changed in several years.
Let me stop you there, Mr. Swisher. Mr. DeFore, are you able to hear Mr. Swisher okay? I can. Can you come closer?
I can't hear any of it. It's got low. Adam, can you turn the speakers up? He'll turn them up a little bit.
Would you like to sit over on the front row so you could see his?
I can actually hear you now. I mean, it was way low the whole time.
Okay. He turned them up.
Yes.
All right. Are we good? Okay. Mr. Ford and Mr. Dyson, I think, were at the last meeting, and spoke about a concern they had, fairly specific concern regarding the noise ordinance. But really, the noise ordinance has not changed in several years. We've added some restrictions to it. But the current noise ordinance, not the one we're proposing, but the one that we're currently operating under, it really has no time of day when something's a violation, except for if you're yelling, shouting, hooting, or clapping beyond like 10 or 11 p.m., that was a violation. Everything else basically was really just any time of the day. If it disturbed your comfort and repose, it was kind of a violation. So what we did is we went in, we've added some standards, saying if it occurs after 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. on Fridays and Saturdays, or 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. on Sundays through Thursdays. We've also made a time frame and added a restriction regarding the proximity to residential sleeping facilities. We've cut out some of the items that were under 10-84, and we've kind of clarified one of those, 10-84, number 4. We've kind of clarified that where it is mainly a vehicle that creates a noise. And we've added in 10-82, number 3, we clarified a little bit. In number 4, special event permits approved by the Board of Aldermen that allow music and other noise during restricted hours at celebratory events in the downtown area or other town of Kernersville parks. Basically, before that, all of the celebrations downtown, Spring Folly, 4th of July, any of those, technically, someone could have challenged it and said they were violating the noise ordinance. They were mostly permitted, so there really wouldn't have been, but if somebody really wanted to challenge it, they could have. So we've cleaned that up. And we did address the concern that Mr. Ford and Mr. Dyson have regarding music that is coming from establishments that are next to residential areas, especially residential areas that were there before basically the commercial establishment moved in. And that we addressed that in 10-83, number 7. And we have in there that if a commercial business has an outdoor entertainment area or has an opening to the outside, and any property line of the facility is within 100 feet of a residential area, the noise produced by the said entertainment must stop no later than 8 p.m. every day. So what that does is it protects existing residential facilities, or not facilities, residential areas, from an entertainment venue moving in next door and playing music all night long. Not just music, but if they have, I think they referred to a comedian at some point. If they have a comedian, the comedian's there, because really under the ordinance without that, they would have to stop at 11 p.m., Monday through Thursday, and 11 p.m. on Friday or Saturday, 10 p.m. on Monday through Thursday. That is a little bit late. I mean, for some folks, especially those that have to get up at 5 o'clock or whatever to be at work at 6:30 or 7. So we were trying to look forward a little bit also and say, that way if someone comes in and they're looking at opening up some type of restaurant, brewery, bar, comic club, whatever it might be, they know that if we do this and it's next to a residential area, then we can't have any outside noise basically after 8 p.m. So that's what we've done. I've gotten several questions from the board about what other folks do, how they handle it. So I put together a chart. I emailed it to you today, and I gave it to you tonight. That basically I went through and researched 10 different municipalities and Forsyth County, so 9 municipalities and then Forsyth County, about what they do. There's no there's no set way of what anybody does. Half of them probably they use decibel readings to say if it's louder than this decibel reading, then you're violating the ordinance. The times of day, they range anywhere from basically any time during the day, kind of which is what ours was, to 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. Some of them, I think, they have 3 different decibel readings for different times of the day. And so what I did was, and I took the reading based on loud music or other things like that. Also, I put in there how they measure it, the distance they measure it. Most of them measure the noise if they have a decibel level. If they say, okay, it can't be higher than 55 decibels or higher than 60 decibels. Most places take the reading at the property line of the complainant. One being Holly Springs, and there may have been one more, I can't remember. They take the reading at the property line of the violator. And one of them takes the reading from the measurement taken at the nearest property line. No, the measurement is taken where the highest where the noise level appears to be the highest. So those 2 are the most restrictive, because if you take the noise reading from the property line of the violator, you could live on the other side of town, and if you hear it, they're going to go to the property line of the violator to take the reading. Well, it might register 200 decibels or whatever there, but in your yard, it might register 30. I mean, some of you might remember, I know the mayor does, and Alderman Penix, and I'm not sure if Alderman Thompson was on board that year or not. We had a citizen complaining about the noise from OmniSource, and that citizen lived almost a mile away if you measure just a straight distance. By road, it was 4 miles. Had we taken the reading at OmniSource, if we had decibel levels, had we taken a reading at OmniSource right there beside the machine that was doing the noise, they're going to be violating the noise ordinance. At her house, you could barely hear it. So taking it from the property line of the complainant, in my opinion, is the fairest way to do that. But we did not recommend doing decibel readings. Several reasons behind that. One of the reasons we didn't, Chief and I discussed it, and Mr. Powell and I discussed it, take a barking dog. If you've got a barking dog that lives behind you and that dog continuously barks, well, it's going to disturb you. After a while, that's going to be disturbing. But if you take a decibel reader out there and you go to your property line, that dog is not going to really register on the decibel meter. The other thing is with decibel readings, and you see these, they're somewhere around 45, I think, being the lowest, and 70 being the highest. To give you an idea of what that is, 45 or 55 rather is a household refrigerator. So if you've got a decibel reading that can't be over 55, if I go out to the property line of your house, you're complaining about something, and if my decibel reader is accurate, it's going to register 55. Just general noise is going to make it register 55. If it's not accurate and it doesn't register 55, it's not doing what it should do. There's no need in having decibel levels. With a decibel level, if you set it at 55 or 60, everything basically is going to be in violation. Now, the catch with not having decibel levels, and Alderman Barrow and I discussed it, is subjective. If we send somebody out, if they can't hear real well, they say, well, I can't hear anything. Somebody else may go out and say, golly, I can hear that. It's pretty subjective, but that's where, that's up for the court to decide at that point. We don't have a lot of issues with the noise ordinance. We can enforce it like it is. The biggest problem is we don't have a time frame on it, and so really it can go on all night. So it's nothing there. That's why we put the time frame on it. also the other thing is a lot of times if they call the police and we go out and we don't hear the noise, we can't cite the person for violating the noise ordinance. Now, it's what we can do is tell the person, you video it and you video it and you go downtown and you take out summons on them and you appear in court as a witness. We've done that. We've had citizens that do that and it works. And it's sometimes more effective than if we go out and try to enforce it. So if we have a decibel reading on there, the citizen is not going to have a decibel meter to check the decibel levels. So it ranges all over the place. I think we decided from an enforcement standpoint, it's better without the decibel readings. Some of these that take decibel readings, one of them, and I think it was Chapel Hill, said you had to take 100 readings in 10 minutes. Honestly, we don't have the manpower or the staff to stand out there for 10 minutes and take 100 decibel readings. The other problem is chances are if they see you out there, they're going to cut the noise off before 10 minutes is up. So, it's one of those things. I think the ordinance without the decibel levels, it gives the citizens more leeway in that they can go do it themselves. We can go do it. We don't have to have the decibel readings. The ordinances that you have here, Forsyth County, Winston-Salem operates under Forsyth County for the most part, except for the one that says unlawful for a commercial establishment in an entertainment district to play amplified music in a manner that causes a noise disturbance on neighboring premises. That was the one part that did not refer back to the counties. Now, what's a disturbance? Any sound or combination of sounds which, because of its volume, disturb reasonable persons of normal sensitivity. It's a little subjective, but that's how they have it. Forsyth County's ordinance, it was about like ours, and it still is. It doesn't have decibel readings. King does not have decibel readings. Forsyth County doesn't. Winston doesn't. Louisville doesn't. Burlington does not. I looked at some more, didn't put them on the chart. Like I say, it was probably 60-40. If you went through all of them that I could find, probably 60% did not have decibel readings, 40% did. I just didn't put them all down. So we're recommending this. We think this will, it'll help with entertainment facilities that are right next to residential. It will give us some time frames to where we can go out. Because like I said earlier, under our current ordinance, basically, if somebody's out, 8 a.m. in the morning mowing their grass, somebody could call and say, hey, they're disturbing my rest, comfort, and repose. A lot of ordinances actually address lawnmowers, landscaping, all of that stuff. They have a start time and an end time. Most common was 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Well, I mowed my yard after 9 p.m. So hours would be 11 or 10. So it does give us some more enforcement there in some of those areas, and it protects the residential areas that are currently existing, and protects the future residential areas that are adjacent to either pedestrian business, general business, commercial, things like that. And it also clears up special events that the town hosts or that the town permits to be allowed. So I'll be glad to answer any questions about any of it. Ed can also address any. He looked at about as many of these as I did, so they kind of all ran together at some point. But we think we've got something that's better than what we currently have, and will help the neighbors out in some different areas in town, and still protect those areas that currently aren't a problem. We didn't want to create a problem where we don't have a problem. That's why we recommended the 100 feet. If we recommended 200 feet or 300 feet from a residential area, that would probably create some problems that are only problems that we created. They're not a problem now, but it would probably pick up some areas that we wouldn't want to pick up, and they would become a problem where they currently are not. So I'll be glad to answer any questions for you all now or after the speakers speak.
Mayor, I have a couple of questions, if I may.
Go right ahead. Speak into the microphone, though, so everyone can hear.
I'm sorry?
Make sure you speak into the microphone so everyone can hear.
Got you. Thank you. First of all, if we're in the subparagraph 7, where we talk about commercial business with an outdoor entertainment area or an opening to the outside, we talk about that facility being within 100 feet of a residential area. Is that measured? Maybe this is a question for Mr. Powell, I'm not sure, but is that measured to the boundary line of the closest residential area to the closest residence itself, the building wall, or how is that defined?
I can answer it because Catherine and I were measuring it and measured it. It's measured from property line to property line.
Okay. All right. And my second question is, does it make any difference from a legal standpoint whether that distance, is there a bright line as to the distance involved to the residential area? In other words, in the draft that's proposed, the draft reflects 100 feet to a residential area. If it were 300 feet to a residential area, is there a bright line where enough is enough and too much is too much, Ed? From a legal standpoint, is there really any difference?
Microphone won't turn on. There you
Okay.
go. Thank you, Manager. This is just one of the standards that we have in there. There's 11 standards.
Mm-hmm.
And in regard to the distances, that's just one of them. And the other 10 would enter into the decision as to whether or not they were violating the noise ordinance.
Okay.
Or the volume of the noise, the intensity of the noise, the time of day or night, where the origin of the noise is natural or unnatural, the volume and intensity of the background noise, the nature and zoning of the area where the noise emanates, and all those factors can enter into whether or not there's a violation of the noise ordinance.
But then I understand that you decided
The only
that there's
reason
nothing.
7, excuse me one second, the only reason 7 with the 100 feet, we thought that was helpful in residential areas, particularly to define future situations where we would not have outdoor entertainment and entertainment from a structure from within that would impinge on the relaxation and quiet repose, if you will, of a residential area.
Okay.
And I'll follow up on that a little bit. The 100 feet, the reason we kept it at 100 feet, because the further out you go, if you go 200 feet or 300 feet or 400 feet, the more different uses you start getting in that 200 or 300 feet. If you go 100 feet, you're probably only going to have like commercial and a residential, maybe a pedestrian business. But if you go out further, especially if you're right on the edge of a commercial area, you could get commercial uses, retail uses, general business, pedestrian business. You start mixing your uses. So at that point in time, I think for enforcement, for going to court, I think you got a much harder case to argue that, hey, this person over here at this residential area is, this noise, this particular noise is bothering this person, because if you go out 300 or 400 or 500 feet, you're going to have noises from everything. And then that person can, the violator can say, look, I'm right beside of a garage. This person working on these cars during the day is just as loud as my band at night. So we didn't want to go too far out and bring into play too many different uses.
Okay.
And that was, 100 feet, you're going to have very limited uses in 100 foot. But if you go out, especially if you go out, we measured it from one area over to Mr. Dyson's house today, and it's almost 2,000 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in that 2,000 feet, you've got a car lot, 2 car lots, a garage, 2 commercial activities, an industrial activity, a train, a gas station, and 2 bars.
So it's harder to enforce.
It's harder to enforce because it's hard to say really that one person is violating it and causing all the noise when you've got 20 different uses in that distance.
That helps me a lot. Thank you.
Yeah.
The other question I had, and then I'll shut up. The other question I have is that, does it matter, is there legal precedent that would impact, that would attach any importance to whether the residential area was in place and an entertainment venue popped down in the middle of that versus if the entertainment venue was in place and people built residences around it? Is there any distinction, Ed, with that?
I think, you could argue that either way. But what we're trying to do is establish something from this point going forward to give notice to those who would, want to establish an entertainment venue that close to a residential area that, there is a law against that and that kind of thing. And that's what we're really looking at is for now and the future, what's occurring and what will occur, and trying to prevent new occurrences that will contribute greatly to it.
Okay. Well, that's very helpful. Well, I know of a couple of situations. I'm made aware of Mr. Dyson's situation, the problem, even though he may not be as close as some residences to a particular venue, it still is disturbing to him. It disrupts his quiet and peaceful enjoyment of his residence. I also know of another situation where there is an elderly family member who is responsible on a regular basis for child care over a weekend, in the residence that is impacted potentially by this type of noise. And I'm sensitive to both of those. On the one hand, you certainly have to protect the business interest and the right of someone to conduct business. On the other hand, I'm not sure if we don't protect the people that live around it that are impacted by the noise of that venue. I'm not so sure who's going to protect them. So I feel a great responsibility on the part of the town and this board to help with that. Thank you for answering my questions. I appreciate it.
So,
I have a couple of questions, Madam Mayor.
Go right ahead.
Thank you. Curtis, you and I talked earlier about decibel meters, and you said you didn't like that concept, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm of the opinion that you got to give everybody something concrete to deal with. The way our ordinance is, the way it was, and probably half of them that you showed us here, it's just who thinks it's a noise is too loud. and the subjective nature of that, you don't know what's going to happen going down the road. And we surely have a duty to the citizens, not to let them be overcome by sound. But if somebody is super sensitive, then we've got to look at the business end of it too, and make sure that there's something that we can objectively measure and determine whether or not somebody's violated the law. And if they have, we can deal with that. I personally have done these cases in court before, and it's very hard for the state to convict anybody of this. I would think that if we had decibel meters, it would make it, a whole lot easier to do what needs to be done, which is make, it peaceful for everyone as much as it can be. Also, that's something I'd like to see, and I think that we need to flesh that out a little more before we vote on this thing, Madam Mayor. The other thing was the measurement of the 100 feet. I think the 100 feet is cool, but property line to property line, that's another, what we're going to do, get a surveyor out there and find the corners and figure out where the line's at. That's a hard thing to deal with. I noticed some of them that I had read before today said that you measure from the source to the person complaining. And that would be something that would be closer to something that we could actually deal with, as opposed to arguing about, well, where's the property line at? You know, lawyers love that kind of stuff, you know. And anyway, if I said I was standing next to the stage and I measured it, and then I went and stood outside this person's bedroom window and measured it, you know, you know where you're at. But anyhow, that's my thought. I think we need to work on this thing a little bit more. I like what you've done, but I personally would like to see it with a little more objective standards.
Yeah, and on the property line, what we used to measure it was in planning. They have the GIS software, and it's pretty easy to pull it up. You can see the property line. It's not going to be dead on, but it's going to be within a foot or two. And it's a matter of just clicking and clicking, and it tells you. So measuring it property line is not a big at now, if it's something right on the spot at midnight, that might be difficult. But at midnight, they're probably violating it anyway because it's after 11 o'clock. So during the day, it won't be an issue to measure it from property line to property line. We could certainly change it if the board so desires, say from the source. You know, I think some of them said 10 foot from the source to the property line. However you do that, if the board chooses to do that, we can come up with some different language on that. The decibels, I 100% see where you're going. That's what I said earlier. I mean, otherwise it is subjective. I would recommend if we do the decibels, you know, the common ones seem to be somewhere around 55 or 60 during the day and 45 to 50 at night. I would recommend doing that for, you know, 1 through whatever it is there, or just put it in 1 through 14, put a decibel level in there. I would still recommend, though, that if it's a commercial business with an outdoor entertainment area within 100 foot of a residential, that you don't apply the decibel to that you just say, hey, if you got outdoor music and you're within 100 feet of a residential area, you stop at 8 o'clock, regardless of what the decibel level is. The rest of it, we could put in there, you know, in 10-83, whatever decibel readings the board would like to see in there. And, you know, that we could do that. It would just entail us having, you know, we'd have to have the decibel readers probably, I guess, chief of the lieutenants probably get 4 or 5 different decibel readers for the lieutenants that are on.
Right. The 8 o'clock time that you came up with, how did y'all arrive at that?
8 o'clock, I mean, the regular time is 10 to 6, but if you're right next to a residential, you know, right next to it, 8 o'clock, most folks aren't in the bed at 8, but I mean, they're getting there pretty close around 9, especially you know, if they got small kids, you know, they're trying to get the kids in bed. I mean, you know, when my kids were little, I tried to get them there about 8 or 8:30. Now it's 12:30, 1 o'clock if I'm lucky. But you know, we were thinking if you're right next to a residential, if they have kids in that house, got young kids, you know, they're trying to get them into bed 8:30. Makes it a lot easier for them to accomplish that.
Right. I saw this, a lot of the ordinances I looked at, it had a time for Friday night and Saturday night, and then the different time for the rest of the week.
And we did that on all of the other violations or nuisances. We didn't do that for the outdoor entertainment area. You know, just because if it is right next to it and it's a young kid, it really not going to be a big difference for them whether it's Monday through Friday or Saturday and Sunday. Right. And also the other thing with the other ordinances, you know, looking at them, if they've got a nighttime or a daytime, you know, Chapel Hill, their daytime decibel reading of 50, they're violating that ordinance anytime during the day.
Yeah, so, it seemed to me that the numbers were low.
Yeah, they were pretty low.
My exposure to it, yeah.
So, and you don't want to go so low that everything violates it. I mean, because if you do and you say, we're going to make it 50, I mean, everything's in violation of it. Everybody, as soon as you pull the decibel reader out, you're going to pop them for being in violation of it. If you do the decibel reading, you will at that point have to, you'll have to come up with a standard of where you want to take the measurement from. I would recommend the property line of the complainant somewhere, not the property line of the violator. Because again, I mean, if I called on somebody on the other side of town and you go take it there, of course it's going to be high.
That's where you should measure from. I agree with you on that.
So
100%.
I think you would have to do that if the board chooses to go with decibel readings as some type of measurement. Then you have to decide where to take the measurements from.
I think probably you could craft this thing such that you could use either a decibel or, somebody just complaining.
Yeah.
They don't have to have a decibel meter. They don't have to be out there, trying to make their case.
Yeah.
I think we could probably do it where you would allow enforcement of the law either way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're correct.
That would just be adding something to what y'all have done here. But thank you.
Excuse me, just a couple more comments. One is that even as drafted, this would not preclude an entertainment venue from doing something inside, not outside and without an opening to the outside. So there are some options there that can, tend to protect the business interest involved, legitimate business interest. And the other thing is, I don't disagree with Alderman Barrow about what he just said about maybe a blended set of criteria to determine what's a nuisance and what constitutes noise, objectionable noise. But I also read long before the last election the problems that Greensboro was experiencing and using decibel levels as a measurement. It seems to me that what they've been doing is if there's too much enforcement, then let's just move the yardstick. Let's just change the measurement. Let's increase the threshold number. And to me, that just avoids dealing with the problem as opposed to, with all due respect for our colleagues to the east, it avoids really addressing the problem, it seems to me. So just as an observation.
And
thank you.
What you just said there is, in my opinion, is what you have if you set the decibel level too low. Everybody's in violation. If you set it too high, then no one's in violation. So
there is no violation if your yardstick moves, right?
Yeah. It's just kind of a toss-up there, honestly.
General Gora?
I just have one point for clarification for me. Is depriving folks the opportunity to sleep, is that's what driving the decision to make it at 8 o'clock? Or are you taking into account?
That is the biggest part for the commercial establishments that have outdoor entertainment venues right next to residential. I mean, gives them an opportunity. I mean, if they go to sleep normally at 8:30 or 9 o'clock and you've got music playing until 11 o'clock on the weekends or 10 o'clock during the week, that's just a couple hours extra they're going to miss there.
Yeah, but what for those folks who not necessarily sleeping, but it's just disturbing their peace, and they can't maybe hear their favorite television program or whatever it may be? I just think that, sleep shouldn't be the driving force behind deciding what the time limit's going to be. Just a thought.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we do have two people signed up to speak. I'll recognize David Dyson. Mr. Swisher, can you make sure the microphone is turned on for Mr. Dyson?
It's green. My name is David Dyson. I live at 417 Vance Street, Kernersville, North Carolina. I don't know. I kind of got lost because I was getting into the conversation. I appreciate Curtis and Chief Summers and Attorney for all the hard work y'all went into and the quick time that this was put out. The only question I had, which was more basically you answered it, Curtis. I was wondering why the footage was, just 100 foot, because I looked out my front door and I'm like, my front yard's 75 feet, and me, 63 years old, the depth of my yard is 150 feet, and I can throw a baseball that far. So, but anyway, I know we're covered, so I really appreciate what y'all have done as far as putting this together. However, I do like the part that Mr. Barrow has brought up about the decibel part. I know that's a sticky situation. I know we've talked about that, but if somehow there could be a space left for that in this ordinance, that would be great. And I was just wondering what, 100 foot, why can't you make it 200 feet? Because right now, as we discussed this afternoon, there was like maybe 3 residential properties. But if we stretched it to 200, we'd have 8 or 9. This is for future reference. If a business come in and said, hey, we're going to put an outdoor venue right here, but we're going to buy these 2 residential properties here and have them rezoned so we can fit in our venue right here. That was the only reason I was questioning just why just 100 feet. I mean, that's not much more than twice the width of this room. And, but anyway, other than that, I appreciate y'all's hard work. Appreciate all you've done. Madam Mayor and the Board of Aldermen, I hope y'all approve this with the assertion, maybe of putting the decibel reading in there at a later date. I appreciate your time and your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dyson. Mr. Ford?
Hi, I want to thank you to all of you very much. It's a lot easier to live with what's been, I'm sorry, I have a vocal cord issue, so please forgive me.
I can hear you fine.
I think the couple of things that just concern me is even after our last meeting and the article that popped up in the newspaper, there were several times that I was almost blasted out of my trailer again. I know that Mr. Kennedy has to know exactly what's going on here. And I know the town has to make money, and that big businesses sometimes can become more important than the people. What concerns me with the way it is this saying that if they have one of their food truck events that starts at 12 in the afternoon one day, that they can blast us out until 8 o'clock at night. Because it wasn't just the noise, it was the time length of the noise and the repetitiveness of the noise and the bass of the noise. Sometimes the music is not as that loud, but if any of you have ever pulled up next to a car that's got the bass pounding, you know how it comes through the windows, and that can be what it's like sometimes. And that may stop at 8, but if I've had to listen to it for 8 hours, I'm about ready to have a nervous breakdown. So I don't know if we can work on the duration of time as well, or how many hours that can go on. But I'm very grateful for the work that's been done. I mean, 8 o'clock a whole lot better than 11, and I'm grateful. In my humble opinion, the outdoor stage should have never been allowed smack in the middle of downtown. You know, Kernersville is very dear to my heart. I came here in 1999 and have moved away and come back a couple of times and had several businesses in town. It's been a very healing place for me. So to come back to retire here and have to deal with this has been a struggle, to say the least. It has been so loud even since the last meeting. that it really is intolerable. I mean, it's much more than just a nuisance. And so I hope for future consideration that there won't be any more outdoor bans and things that, I mean, I just wish it wasn't there at all, because it concerns me that, you know, I even spoke to Mr. Kennedy personally and asked him to explain I'm on disability, I'm healing from surgery and PTSD because I worked in mental health for many years. And quite frankly, he didn't care, and it got louder. So I know that the concern on his end is not there, and I don't mean to call him out personally. I'll be glad to say the business, but I talked to him, not the business. And when I said, you know, you don't need to blast the whole neighborhood. And he said, no, I don't, but I can. And that was his exact words, and you can quote me on that. So the fact that he truly does not care about the neighbors who have talked to him, I'm not the only one that's talked to him, shows me a lot about his character and his concerns. And you know, Jesus has a saying, what good does it do to gain the whole world if you lose your soul? And when you make a business that thrives on the misery and the suffering of others, whether it be noise, alcoholism, whatever, you can be sure that won't last. And this town has been where I found Christ, where many people have found Christ. And I really pray that the town doesn't sell the soul of the town for money. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so any further discussion? Do we want to continue this and let the town attorney work on it a little bit more, or do we want to vote on it tonight?
No, I'd like some time to, you know, work with Curtis and try to figure out, you know, exactly what this thing should look like.
Okay, so maybe to
I don't
continue
like it the way it is. I just think we can do a better job for everybody.
Should we continue it to the February meeting or continue it to a future agenda? Do you have time to work on it this week?
Yeah, I think this week will be fine.
You want to bring it next week if we
can look at
can
it.
work that out? It seems like a kind of a small change.
Yeah, I think we can, I'm meeting with John on Friday anyway, so I think we can, Ed and I put something together before next Tuesday. I think it's what we'll do is,
Curtis, if you move your
I
microphone.
think it's what we'll do. I mean, I think we can, like Alderman Barrow said, I think we can incorporate, you know, some language so that you have decibel readings, you have reasonable decibel levels of, you know, maybe 60 during the day and 55 at night or whatever. But yet you have some language in there that says, even if a noise doesn't reach these decibel levels, but it's a continuing noise, whatever, which is, some of them were worded that way, then you don't use a decibel reading. And mainly that would be for daytime noises, because you know, at nighttime, it's going to be cut and dry. If somebody goes out and it's midnight, 1 a.m., decibel levels there, you're obviously violating it. But it's what you want is for the scenario where you do have that barking dog during the day or at 10 o'clock that's not violating the decibel reading, but yet it's pretty much just disturbing you. And I think we can accomplish that. I think that's kind of what I heard from the board. We'll look at I think if you go, like Alderman Barrow said, if you go from the source, if you say we're going to go X number of feet from the source to the property line of the complainant, I think you'll probably have to increase your footage from 100 foot to probably 200 foot, because the actual source may not be right on that property line. They usually place those somewhere in the middle of the property or whatever. So I think if you do that, then you do go to 200 feet or 300 feet so that you don't have it. It's what they could easily do. Is what you don't want to get into is a situation where they just move the source of the music to the far end of the property right against another commercial piece, and it gets it out from being near the residential. Because in terms of the disturbance and the noise is not going to change much, but then you've got it right there. So, I mean, I think we can work on something if the board's fine with that and have it ready by next Tuesday night. You can continue it to next Tuesday and we'll bring something back then, if that works for everybody.
I would like to just add to that we be thinking forward, where we are today is not where we're going to be 10 years from now.
Correct.
The decisions that we make today, we need to be kind of thinking about what's Kernersville is going to be looking like maybe 10 years from now, and how the decision that we're making today is going to affect that. And also to take into account what was said just a few minutes ago, that noise, during the day can be just as intolerable as it is during the night, depending on folks' schedule and jobs schedules. As we transition here in Kernersville, we got to be thinking about it 24 hours a day, not just at certain periods of time. So in your decision-making process, if you would maybe take that into account too.
I agree, because if you got someone that works third shift and they sleep during the day, we don't have anything that really addresses that. And it's like Mr. Ford said, the outdoor entertainment venue, they can play the music up until 8. Well, you do probably need something to say, okay, if it's higher than 60 decibels during the day, which it would be, then they've got to turn it down, which would address the concern. You have someone that works third shift sleeping during the day. Right now, they're really not as protected as someone at night, for sure. So we'll work on it, and if the board wants to make the motion to continue it to next Tuesday, we'll have something ready for you to look at next Tuesday.
Okay, how about we do 2 separate motions, one to continue it, and if that passes, then we can make a motion to amend the agenda for the January 11th meeting. And I see 2 possible places we could put it. We could either put it at item 2E, which would be the last of the public session items, or we could reshuffle the items under the public session item 2 and put it immediately after speakers from the floor. So it will be later in the meeting likely, because there are several public hearings that have to come first. All right, so did you want to make a motion to continue?
I'd make a motion to continue consideration of that till the Tuesday meeting.
Okay.
And I'll second it.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Okay, it's unanimous. All right, and then I need a motion to amend the agenda for the Tuesday, January 11th meeting.
So moved.
Okay. Should we move this, General Gorham, to item 2E or immediately after speakers from the floor?
I think immediate after speakers from the floor.
Okay. I have a motion to amend the upcoming agenda, January 11th, to move this to after item 2A. Do I have a second?
I'd second that.
I have a second from Alderman Apple. All those in favor, raise your right hand. It's unanimous. All right. Mr. Hooker, if you can make that change and update the agenda for us.
I will do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, great discussion. Thank you for coming back. And please come back next Tuesday. All right. Now we are to item 1E, briefing on the January 11th regular meeting agenda, which of course we've just slightly changed. Mr. Swisher, if you'd like to pick up and kind of go through the agenda. If anyone has questions about the rezoning cases, Ms. Garner is here and can answer them. Our discussions about these items will be next week. This is simply informational and opportunity to ask questions.
Yeah, I'll let Ms. Garner cover the 3 public hearings briefly, tell you what they are, and then item 2B as well.
Good evening, Mayor and Aldermen. Our first case on the public hearing agenda is for a property located on Pineview Court and also has frontage on English Street. It's 2 parcels. The parcel currently has an approval for a 4-story apartment complex. It's 1 single building in both scenarios. But with this revised request, the applicant is looking to add a 5th story. It went to the planning board in December, and the vote was 5-3 on this one. Are there any questions before I move on?
So is that the issue? One of the issues was the storage. So is the storage anticipated to be limited to the residents of the other nearby apartments, or just the residents of that specific building?
The applicant has expressed to me that it could be used by the residents of this building, but also the Gateway building across the street, across Pineview. He owns both properties. Whether he intends to also lease it out for just general use, I'm not aware. That would be something that you could ask him at the hearing on Monday. I have advised him that he should be there, certainly, to speak on it. But I think his intent is that it would be utilized by residents of his facilities in the area.
There's nothing in the case that or the zoning laws that would limit it to that, though, is there?
Not as currently proposed.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions about 1A? All right.
The second item is from Best Logistics Company. They are looking at rezoning the former Farmers Bureau Insurance Office on Highway 66 to be a vocational or professional school for training truck drivers. So that is what you've seen their truck out there advertising it. They do have a temporary use permit to begin operations on the site within the building, but they would be utilizing the existing parking lot and the existing building to train drivers learning to drive those vehicles.
Okay, any questions? All right, C.
Our final public hearing is at Smith Crossing. The original Smith Crossing rezoning had a condition that limited the number of fast food restaurants with drive-through. Smithfield's Chicken and Barbecue is requesting a revision to that for their parcel. This is the vacant parcel across the street from McDonald's, between McDonald's and the Food Lion Shopping Center. They would like to build a restaurant with a drive-through and are proposing rezoning as such. So it received favorable recommendation from Planning Board.
Okay, and then item 2B, the SITA.
This is in conjunction with the first case on Pineview Court. This just relates to the amount of impervious surface coverage this parcel can have for the watershed. The existing approved development plan on this site for the 4-story building also received a SITA, but that SITA has expired. It has a time limit of which it's valid, so they would need a new one for this request.
Are there any questions? Nobody's going to ask what's a SITA? It lets them have more impervious coverage. We have extra allocations for the downtown area, so it's a common request in the downtown area. Any other questions? Right. Stormwater laws are everywhere. Okay, item 2C, consideration of an ordinance for budget amendment number 4. Mr. Swisher.
Madam Mayor and Board, I think this is the first budget amendment for the 3 new members. So I'll just briefly kind of tell you what a budget amendment is. The first thing, it does not mean that we're broke and having to take money out of the fund balance and that we're operating in the red. What it does mean is that that line item that you're either moving money to or moving money from, that line item we did not account for this particular expenditure when we set the budget in July of whatever particular year, either 2021 or 2022 or moving forward. So we're asking the board to appropriate money to that line item to cover an expenditure that was unexpected. Now, the way that we're not operating in the red is that you're just seeing a snapshot of that particular line item. There's 10 different departments with hundreds of line items. Some of those may have $75,000 in a particular line item and we've not spent anything and may not spend anything. So, we're not operating in the red until the end of the year when everything's finalized and all the money goes back into the general fund and we say, okay, this was our expenses, this was our revenue, then you know what we're doing. This is just simply allocating more money to that line item for whatever particular expenditure we have. You'll see some of the expenditures that we're asking to cover have an offsetting revenue. In this particular budget amendment, the biggest one of those, item number 2, to increase the engineering department $1.475 million to cover costs associated with the construction of sidewalk improvements on Old Winston Road and a sanitary sewer extension on Brookford Road. If you'll look down in general fund revenues, number 1, you'll see that we're getting $1.422 million. So basically we're offsetting it. The difference of $52,000 was our 20% match of the DOT grant for doing the sidewalk. Most sidewalks, most roads, we have a 20% match. So that's what that is. The other expenditures you see in there, increased governing body $2,000 to cover property taxes for properties on Beeson Road. Increase the street department, $12,000 to cover temporary employee costs and reflect the transfer from the solid waste department. We moved an individual from solid waste over to streets, temporary employee. I have the authority given by the board to move money from each line item in the department from one line item to another. I can't move it from one department to another, but I can move it from one line item to another. In this particular case, we're moving it from street department to from solid waste to street. So the board has to approve that. The other one, increase the solid waste department for the net amount of $158,000 to cover the purchase of a new rear loading refuse truck and the $12,000 transfer to the street department. That truck, I need to explain the truck. You're approving the $170,000 so that we can show that in a line item, and we're just simply ordering the truck. We're not buying the truck. The truck will be in the budget for next year, fiscal year 22-23. We have to order that truck now in order to get it before fiscal year 22-23 runs out. It takes about 14 months to get it. So that's what you're doing. You're just approving that. That money will roll back into the general fund at the end of the year because we won't spend it. We won't have the truck here. And then the recreation department, you're increasing net expenditures from net amount of $6,000 to cover cost $1,000 for the USTA. We received a grant for that. And then $5,000 for some demolition work at Civitan Park. So again, there may be, Parks and Rec may have another line item that still has $25,000 left in it. We just didn't move it from that line item. But at the end of the year, it all goes back in, and then we see where we're at. So that's the budget amendment. There is one where we're moving money in the capital project fund on the back. The Kernersville CPO Greenway Fund, that's just a washout. Expenditures and revenues, they wash out. The fire department fund, we're closing that capital project fund there. That $44,000 will roll back into the general fund. And then the recreation facility, we've set up the capital project fund, will increase the expenditures. That $12 million reflects the loan as well as the loan payment that we had. That fund already has, for those of you that were on the board, the $1.2 million where we sold the rights to the communications tower. We sold the leases on that. It has that in there already. So we're rolling that $12 million in. We've not gotten the loan yet, but that's what we're anticipating the loan to be. So we're setting that up. So be glad to answer any questions that you have tonight. If you think of any between now and Tuesday, just let me know. I'll be glad to answer any that you may come up with.
Any questions at this time? Okay, Mr. Swisher, we can move on to item D.
Item D is a sanitary sewer extension. It's a contract for that. It has been a long time in the making, about probably 10, 12 years at least. That will extend the sanitary sewer up through Brookford Road. The low bid was received from Baker Underground in the amount of $895,230. That project has been bid out, so it's been designed. It is ready to go to construction. the money, the $895,000 will come from the town's water and sewer fund. It will not come from the general fund. We will pay for it, and then we will submit our reimbursement request to city county utilities to be reimbursed for that. So that full amount will not impact the general fund at all. So that will allow what that really does is you are traveling east on Medical Parkway, the property down at the bottom of the hill there on your right, that will put sewer in that area and allow all of that property to develop. Right now there is not sewer, so it really is tough to develop it, but sewer will go in. We have agreements with those property owners that as they come in and tie on to that sewer, they have to annex that property into the town. So right now, as it is, if they could go in and get a septic tank, then that property would not be in the town. So they'll come in, tie on, and we'll get the tax base from that.
All right, any questions? Are there any questions about any of the agenda items for the upcoming January 11th meeting? All right, we'll move back to the briefing meeting agenda. We have a consent agenda tonight in an effort to have our meetings flow smoothly and have a shorter meeting on Tuesday. So we do have a consent agenda tonight. It has items 2A, approval of minutes for December 1 briefing. B, approval of minutes for December 7 organizational meeting. C, approval of minutes for December 14 regular meeting. And D, approval of minutes for December 14 closed session. All of the minutes for items A, B, and C are available online. The minutes for D are not, since it was a closed session. They're kept separately by the clerk. All right. If you'd like to have something removed from the consent agenda, I'd need a motion, either from someone on the board or someone attending this meeting in person. Is there anyone who'd like to see anything removed from the consent agenda? All right. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve items 2A, 2B, and 2C of the consent agenda.
But not 2D?
And D, yeah, sorry.
Okay. I have a motion by Alderman Thompson.
Second.
I have a second by Alderman Apple. All those in favor, raise your right hand. It's unanimous. All right, then we are moving on to the town manager's report. Mr. Swisher.
Madam Mayor, I have two items, both of those fairly quick. We are asking for the board's approval to allow the police department to apply for the Justice Assistance Grant. It's $24,500. It is 100% grant, no match required. We would use that to purchase 5 in-car radios. So if the board sees fit, need a motion to allow us to apply for that grant. And then if we receive it, we'll come back, the board will approve the grant.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Alderman Thompson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Penix. All in favor? Raise your right hand. It's unanimous.
Second item is an item I would like for the board to consider adding to the agenda on Tuesday night. It can be at the very end of the agenda. It's a staff item. I would like to add on their discussion and consideration of hiring a safety coordinator in the HR department that will right now mainly do all of our COVID tracking and COVID related everything. That has became nightmare might be a good description. Crystal might describe it more appropriately, but I would say it's become a nightmare for HR. We're not anticipating that going away anytime soon as far as what we are required to do. And from the standpoint of even if they don't mandate, OSHA doesn't mandate the vaccine or whatever, even if they don't mandate it, it's still taking up a lot of time for folks that's not their job. We can use the ARPA money to cover that. We don't even know that we think we could probably cover the next 6 months, through the end of this budget cycle. maybe without any ARPA money, just from money that we already have in the budget, from the way we've seen some salaries change and whatnot in that department. But if it would require extra funding, we would use the ARPA money. We feel pretty sure we can use that for a full year, if not 2 full years, to pay for that position. But we know definitely 1 year. So I'll have a memo if the board would add that to the agenda, then we'll add it on there, and I'll add the information with that, and we'll discuss it in more detail Tuesday night.
Okay, that would be included in section 2, the public session. Do I have a motion to amend the agenda as recommended by the town manager?
So moved.
Motion by Alderman Thompson. Do I have a second? Second by Alderman Barrow. All those in favor, raise your right hand. It's unanimous. Anything further, Mr. Swisher?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Powell?
I'd just like to thank the mayor and the board again for your confidence you've shown in me, and particularly tonight, in elevating my position. I'll work every day as hard as I know how to earn your trust and your approval.
Thank you. You've done a very good job for us, and we appreciate your service. All right. Matters to be presented by the mayor and board of aldermen. Mr. Thompson.
I have nothing at this time, other than looking forward to working with Ed for another year.
Mr. Barrow.
I got one little thing. I was out in front of the office today, and this truck pulls up, parks in the middle of the road there, blocks the traffic. Some kid jumps out, runs around, does something with the package, comes back, 2 or 3 minutes later, gets in his truck and does a 3-point turn and heads back in the other direction. Is that not against the law to double park like that? Chief, is that against the law? Well, that's about the most aggravating thing for everybody on the road. I've seen them stop out on Hopkins Road, just stop right in the middle of the road, and people come up and down, and there's been some horrible accidents caused on account of that. And, I don't know what can be done about it other than start writing them guys some tickets or something for doing that. I mean, maybe warn them first, hey, they could have parked right across the street there. And, it's so dangerous. And the thing is, by ignoring them and letting them do that, they're competing with people that do business in Kernersville, because the things they're delivering are items that they could go buy somewhere in Kernersville, but they're not, the brick and mortar things. But anyhow, I think we got to treat them like we treat anybody else, and I think that we should be writing tickets for that. And I don't know what the penalty is, but I know most companies don't want you bringing a bunch of tickets in if you're driving their equipment. So anyhow, I'd like us to maybe work on that somehow. That's all I got on that.
It was really bad during the holiday season. I mean, everybody saw them stopped everywhere, and I mean, they're fast, but still that length of time. I mean, it's a couple minutes before they get up there and get back to the truck. That's the problem. Yeah. You have to have an officer there.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. I saw one on Hopkins Road as you go into the first curve there that goes to the left. I mean, I say he tried. I don't know that he tried, but it looked like he attempted to get the truck somewhat off the road, but he was 75% in the middle of the lane. And as you said, it's what it does is it forces the people into the other lane to get around them, and it is dangerous. But like I said, I mean, catching them's the hard part, unless our officer is riding right by there.
Well, I mean, that's the way they catch people.
Yeah, that's it. That's how they catch them speeding.
All you got to do is follow the truck.
Yeah.
It's simple.
That's it.
Follow him, he's going to do it.
Yeah.
Write him a warning ticket and then tell him next time it won't be so easy.
I missed the first part of that question, the conversation. Are we talking about drivers like for Amazon and all those
I'm
kinds of
assuming that's what he's talking about.
Wouldn't it be better if we address that with the company to see if they could put in a policy or something, bring it to the attention of their drivers so that we're giving them an opportunity to correct this problem before we start trying to write folks up and stuff of that nature. Is that possible?
It probably already is a policy that they don't park in the road.
Maybe we just need to bring it to their attention, right, and tell them before we start, right, because we want to be friendly to these folks. They're bringing in a whole lot of tax dollars for us, right?
Yeah, we have worked with FedEx before on the route that they utilize going from the terminal there off of Old Greensboro Road over to New 40. At one time they were going all the way up to Medical Parkway and turning down there, and we said, guys, you've got to go down Industrial Drive here. So we can contact those folks. I mean, it's primarily Amazon, UPS, and FedEx, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
I don't see the post office doing it as much. I mean, they, of course, I don't know that what they do is any better from a infrastructure standpoint. They drive up onto the sidewalk in part, which at least they're out of the way, but then they're tearing up the sidewalk. So, but yeah, we can address it we can have the police department address it with those folks and then start, enforcing it from a warning ticket standpoint. And hopefully it won't be as bad now that we're through the holiday season, but I think they've gotten in the habit and routine of doing it, and that's what they do. And, it's not as bad in the neighborhood, but it is pretty bad out on the main road.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. If they're in a neighborhood, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
But boy, when they get out on a big road around here, traffic's hard enough anyhow.
Yeah.
It's a mess.
I encountered that out on the eastbound lane of 158 over the cresting a hill right this side of Blues Lake one day, and there was an Amazon truck right stopped dead in the middle of the eastbound lane of 158. So,
Well, Mr. Barrow, you've got a good point in that there's a sign up in front of the consignment shop that went up after people started from prior business, started loading vehicles and unloading vehicles there.
Right.
So, that's been a problem with other businesses too, and we've enforced it.
Well, sure. But fair is fair. We shouldn't let those courier and delivery services run all over us. Because we hold our citizens to the same standard as you said. Anyhow.
Do you have anything else?
That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Apple?
Mayor, just one thing. I want to just simply say how fortunate I think we are to have our colleague Ed Powell to step into the breach. Has got great experience. He's got great judgment, and I think he'll serve the town well. He'll continue the tradition of service, of excellent legal services to the town, and we're happy to have you.
Thank you. Alderman Gorham? Alderman Penix? So I have a question about the sound levels at this meeting. Maybe I'm willing to do a sound check at the beginning of the meeting if that would help. I'm not sure that's been part of what we've done, but if we need to test the microphones, we can do that. If there's any suggestions from staff as to how to check. I heard everything fine from the beginning of the meeting, so except maybe the first part of the minister's prayer.
I mean, we can do one when we're here setting up. Just have someone at the back of the room and test it. It's not an issue. I mean, it is still, it may be loud enough for whoever's at the back of the room, and then still may not be able to hear everyone during the meeting. But I mean, it's pretty easy to turn up. They can turn it up back in the back there. So, just like tonight, if Mr. Dappin or other citizens can't hear it, they'll just let us know. Then we can turn it up. But I didn't want to interrupt the representative. Okay. Yeah, and we'll see we'll make a note of where it's set right now, and then we'll set it there at future meetings, and if we need to, we can turn it up.
I'd be interested to know what the decibel level of.
Well, I can tell you, according to the decibel level chart, normal conversation is 60 to 70.
Yeah, and that's kind of my point based on what the charts say that you have, that we're possibly close to what the ordinances are in some of these other places.
Yeah, if somebody was standing outside, we might be violating the ordinance.
The reason that I'm having trouble with it and these hearing aids that I wear is because I stood in front of some speakers at an outdoor entertainment venue when I was in high school.
I understand.
I just wanted to say Happy New Year to everyone. And with that, there's no further business. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, I have a motion by Alderman Thompson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Gorham. All in favor? Signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. This meeting is now adjourned.